Nintendo recently announced a system called the Nintendo 2DS, the next in the line of Nintendo 3DS systems. And the reception has been interesting, to say the least. Well, what is Nintendo 2DS? That's a very good question, and there seems to be a lot of concern. But fear not! Here's everything you need to know. It is a Nintendo 3DS. It runs the 3DS operating system, it plays 3DS games, it plays DS games, there are no special 2DS games, that's not a thing. And it has every Wi-Fi feature of its brothers. It is a Nintendo 3DS, but of course it has a few major differences. Primarily, it doesn't actually run games in 3D. The 3DS has this fancy little slider on the side where you can adjust the volumes of the 3D, but Nintendo 2DS doesn't do that. It runs exclusively in 2D. The 2DS also does not have the clamshell design. Unlike every past DS system, it does not have this fancy clamshell design, it just stays open. Now, because it doesn't have a clamshell design to detect whether it should go into sleep mode or not, there's this little switch on the console that determines the sleep mode. The battery life of the 2DS will be in line with other Nintendo consoles, so I would guess 5 to 8 hours, but really who knows what that means. It has this sort of ultra matte finish, or matte, I don't know, I've only ever seen that word in writing, I'm sorry. But unlike the glossy finish of the original 3DS, it's really more akin to the inside of a Nintendo 3DS XL. There's one speaker on the console as opposed to two, but you can still achieve stereo output with the headphone jack. It still has two cameras on the outside, so it can take 3D pictures, and you can play all sorts of the 3DS augmented reality games. Now, admittedly, a lot of people don't play the AR games, but if you want them, they're there. 2DS gamers will not miss out. Much like the 3DS XL, the console has a black finish in the front, and the backside has the colors, and it comes in red or blue. And that's it. Those are all the changes of the Nintendo 3DS to 2DS. Well, except the shoulder buttons are now concave, and the start and select buttons are repositioned for better comfort, but whatever. Nintendo 2DS releases on October 12th for $129.99. And now the biggest thing is that Nintendo 2DS is aimed at children. Notice my amazing segue into the part of the video where I actually argue that Nintendo 2DS is a brilliant idea. The 2DS exists purely to create market share, and for that purpose, Nintendo did an outstanding job. Admittedly, Nintendo could have chosen a much better title for the console so that parents of the little baby gamers would not get so easily confused, because, I mean, I would have gone with Nintendo 3DS Junior or something like that, just so it would be easier to discern between what console is for whom, but Nintendo is really not that famous for naming their consoles well. So first of all, Nintendo 2DS is aimed at children. People who don't have a 3DS yet. It's not meant to make you switch off of your 3DS XL, it's not meant to make you give up your precious portability, it's not a backtrack on 3D, it's not some tyrannical way of making you pay more money for another console. It's an alternate way to play. Now, it's an excellent system for children and their families. First of all, children don't worry about portability. In a world where kids are used to tablets being, like, everywhere, it really does not make that big of a difference. And it's also not like its sturdy, non-folding design is anything new to gaming. Kids see video games and they're just happy to play them. They don't worry about cramming them into their pockets. They really are just happy to have the system. And Nintendo's carrying case that they're releasing alongside the 2DS should be plenty to satiate the need for carrying it. Secondly, Nintendo 2DS's design is excellent for children and the demonic way they treat their toys. Lord knows my Game Boy took a beating when I was younger, and had it not been so solidly clunky, it very well could have snapped in half. It is not that hard. And let's not forget, with no 3D option, it completely negates the health hazard that Nintendo 3DS has been warning about for children 7 years and under. With the 2DS, there's absolutely no worry. There's no risk of bumping the 3D slider up a little bit. There's no worry for parents to need to go through all the system settings and change all the parental controls to disable 3D. It's all done right there, right out of the box, with absolutely no hassle. And this is done because it's specifically made for the people who are not supposed to be using 3D anyway. Now, because there's no clamshell, and primarily because there's no 3D screen, the 2DS costs a significant amount less to manufacture than the 3DS, and so they can reduce the retail price accordingly. Like I said, Nintendo 2DS launches at $129.99, which we all know is really $130, and then there's tax, yeah. But that's a good $40 cheaper than the Nintendo 3DS, and $70 cheaper than the Nintendo 3DS XL. That's a big difference. Now, this is great for two reasons. One, it's a much more affordable console for the people who don't want to buy a 3DS or a 3DS XL because they don't want to spend that extra money. The other reason being, again, it's a console for 7-year-olds. Game devices are always fragile pieces of equipment, and parents will feel a lot better buying a 2DS for their kids than they will buying their extra fragile counterparts that cost another $70. And if a child does manage to beat up a 2DS enough, it's again that much less of a burden to replace. Now, this doesn't mean that 2DS is only going to be for children. Plenty of people have suggested that they don't really like the 3D option on Nintendo 3DS, and for those who don't care about portability, saving that extra cash is now an option now that the 2DS is going to be on the market. Now, Nintendo 2DS is not for you. It's not meant to be an upgrade, it's an alternative console for entry-level gamers. And in that regard, Nintendo has done everything right to make it an entry-level console for entry-level gamers. And last but not least, remember how I said that the Nintendo 2DS releases on October 12th? Well, so does Pokémon X and Pokémon Y. Pokémon is not only Nintendo's biggest handheld system seller ever, but it may surprise you to hear that the target audience for the Pokémon series is actually around age 7, give or take like 3 or 4 years. Coincidence? I think not. Nintendo has a very specific audience that they're targeting, and they're going after it with everything they've got. If you want a 2DS, that's great. You can have one. And if you don't want one, then there's absolutely no reason to complain. Because it doesn't affect you in any way, and it's just good business practice. That's all there is to it. Oh yeah, I'm Colin. I never mentioned that. Bye! Ooh, wow. And for that purpose, Nintendo did an